Coherence. To cohere together, to join together, to bind together by some invisible force, some interconnection of polarities that brings the 0 and the 1 into 1, that begins the plus and the minus into a plus plus, minus minus, plus minus minus plus. Cultivating coherence, cultivating the capability to cohere, to join together with another, to not always be in separation, but to be able to ride the same frequency. For both players to be able to generate and maintain that same frequency, to keep that frequency going, to make sure that frequency doesn't die, it doesn't collapse on itself and collapse into something a lot worse. Continuing to build that relationship of coherence, that relationship of synchronizing, of synergizing, of breathing together, of conspiring, where each player inspires together and expires together, dying at the same time at the end of the game, being born at the same time at the beginning of the game, allowing the game to end when it comes to its end, to be coherent in face of the end of the game, and to not weep that the play is now over.
And if so, weep together. Coherence of phases. It's got something to do with phases and frequency and resonance and waves and mutuality. Mutuality in a sense that is way broader and deeper and higher at the same time than what we usually put into a likeness or understanding. It's a deeper concept that takes us into the very structure of how things are built together. The universe is a coherent place. Although there is incoherence in it, there is the paradox again. Coherence inhabits incoherence, or incoherence inhabits coherence as part of it. And still, with so many incoherences, there is the overall thing coherent, meaning it belongs to each other and it knows that it belongs to each other. It would never let go. It can move freely, though it is an abductive process of the other.
Incoherences within coherences, within incoherences, within coherences. The challenge of creating one great coherence that can cohere all of our incoherences together. Learning how to consensually cohere with other people, to come from a place of sovereignty and generate together collective intelligence, collective insight, collective wisdom. The collective and coherence go together so tightly. To generate positive collectivity, we need coherence. When there's not coherence, then we have destructive collectivity. We have many crabs in a bucket, There's no coherence between the crabs. Each crab is coherent within itself, wearing its own little crab crown, trying to reach out of the bucket and climb into a new world for itself. But the coherence would be for all of the crabs to swing together until they can make the bucket sway and together topple the bucket and all escape out into the sea. They've no longer been fished by the fishermen, but they've escaped into the infinite ocean, where they can each find their own pocket of coherence. They can all find the shell in which they can inhabit and find their peace.
How do we realize that we're in sync? How do we realize that something is coherent? What is the feeling and the perception of coherence? Is that a warmth? Is it a tingling sensation? Is it a tantalizing feeling? Is it something that I want more of? Is it healing? Is it distracting me from other things? Is it bringing me to pursue something together with others? Is it exciting? Or is it so subtle that within all the incoherences around me, I stumble across it and I don't realize the four-leaved clover on the floor? And can I be coherent with destruction? Where is the coherence in all the war going on and in all the trouble that we create? Is there something as a good coherence and a bad coherence, a destructive coherence? This system that we have created seems to me quite coherent in itself, and it's very difficult to find leverage points to move to another game.
Multi-level coherence. Within the mind of an enraged, psychotic, murderous human being, there is the coherence of deep down the atoms themselves, then the chemical bonds, then the biological bonds. Within the mind, there might be a coherence of why this is the way to be. Within a world which pretends to be coherent, but which is deeply incoherent. On one level, it is coherent. It is a coherent game where it makes sense to build your military as great as possible, to defend yourself from all the other nations who are playing exactly the same game. How to grow to a higher level of coherence. First comes the positive disintegration of breaking down the pseudo-coherence of this level so that a greater coherence can be built at the next level. What is this greater coherence? It is the giving up of fear on individual and collective level, sacrificing fear for the greater good of world peace, of war against war, so that all can live for all.
higher level of coherence? Higher level. What about the coherence in the soil? What about our coherence with the soil and with the earth and with the other more than human beings on the planet? What about our coherence with the wind, with the sand that is carried by the wind, with the earthworms in the soil, with the decomposing? Maybe we're looking for lower levels of coherence, like for the deepest level of coherence that we can find and rebuild what we cut as roots into the history of where we come from and the histories, the stories of where we come from. Where is the coherence in the stories of the land and our stories? Deeper coherence. And even deeper. Maybe we need to burn in the center and let go of all the incoherences until the chaos is big enough and we disintegrate.
Deeper coherence, higher coherence, wider coherence. That which we crown is that to which we cohere. To return the crown to its rightful owner, Mother Nature. To all cohere to the great cycles of being, not to the pseudo-cycles, manufactured calendars and work weeks that keep you working and make you weaker and weaker, make you cohere into some system that tears you apart. A bite of flesh every day, a pound for a pound, as they say. Do we have to lose everything to gain something new? How violent is this fight going to become for a new world? Is there going to be new war and revolution within countries? Coherences fighting against each other to see if we will maintain this coherence or if we will create a new one.
Coherence is a description of a state. In itself, descriptions of a state do not work as solutions. We need to bring in other beads. Game beads. Psychotechnologies to understand coherence. To discern the levels of where coherence is necessary and where it is not, where we have to incohere again, purposely, wishfully, intentionally, to find it on a different level, like the beats in a beat roller coaster, traveling from one level to the other. and sometimes just being carried out of the curve. How can we be carried out of the curve? To still be coherent with the law of physics, but letting go of that curve. That's the way of coherence. Combined with intention, combined with deeper understanding, and combined with technologies that bring us back to life. Not coherence to be coherent, but to be alive together.
The psychotechnology that allows us to feel what coherence feels like is a game of coherence and incoherence, a game which allows us to play with being coherent and being incoherent, of making sentences which are coherent and not sense making all at, building patterns and breaking patterns, of cohering with what somebody else is saying and then incohering, building with others and then battling with others, to build and to destroy, to cohere and to incohere, to bring together and to pull apart, but all within the context of a larger coherence, of all playing with coherence and incoherence together so we understand what it feels like. Psychotechnologies that help us measure the feeling of coherence, that help us measure collective coherence. What does collective intelligence look like? How can we measure that? What does collective wisdom look like? How can we measure that? The output of games, what emerges from a game collectively, what new coherence emerges from a game. Figuring out how to measure those new coherences and then implementing that code, that game code, to develop as much coherence as we can.
Yeah. The code and the context of the coherences and the different contexts and the context within context within context within context and the transcontextuality and the coherence throughout these different contexts, across these different contexts, like a vein system, a root system, the capillaries of coherences deep in the transcontextual web of the space that connects coherence with the larger picture. The understanding that it reaches out into forever and has been there forever, and to follow that thread of coherence, to listen to this one and not the artificial one that we created, to listen for the real space connecting tissue coherence and life and time connecting tissue coherence that can be felt and that can be perceived. How to develop psychotechnologies that allow us to dive into this perception and to rearrange our brain coherence, our brain wave coherences, so that we align and are in resonance with the bigger, deeper, wider reaching, space-time connecting, interrelational coherence, which is actually part of the truth.